Found in the attic of 147 Maple Street, Burlington, Vermont, December 15th, 2024. I'm holding my great-great-grandfather's journal in trembling hands. The leather is cracked, the pages yellow and brittle, but his words are as sharp as the bayonet he must have carried. I found it yesterday while cleaning out Grandma Helen's attic after her passing. What follows is his account, transcribed exactly as written, though I almost wish I hadn't read it at all. June 17th, 1863. My name is Thomas Wheeler, and if you're reading this, I'm likely long gone. Perhaps that's for the best. Some memories shouldn't belong to the living. I wasn't always a soldier. Before all of this, I worked my father's dairy farm in Burlington. We weren't wealthy, but we got by. Mother died of consumption when I was just 12, leaving father to raise my sister Mary and me alone. He was a good man, stern but fair, who taught us that all men were created equal. When the war broke out, he spoke passionately about preservation of the Union and the evil of slavery. I enlisted with the 13th Vermont Infantry, not just because of his beliefs, but because I truly thought we'd finish this war within months. I figured if Lincoln wants to send some of us Vermont boys down south, then I would answer the call. We have seen a lot in the couple of years that I have been enlisted. Just this past December, we defended the Fairfax courthouse against a group of cavalry. Shortly thereafter, we were called to run duty at Wolf Run Shoals along the Occoquan River. Then we have been stationed along the Occoquan Creek, waiting for the rebels to try to take a position north of the creek. It hasn't been easy. June 25th, 1863. We started marching to Gettysburg. The hunger never leaves us. We've been marching for 20 miles straight, nothing but hardtack and salt pork when we're lucky. Most days is just coffee made from burned corn and whatever we could forage. Yesterday, Simmons found some berries. By nightfall, he was doubled over with dysentery. We left him at a farmhouse, but we all know what that means. My brogans fell apart today. Wrapped my feet in strips of blanket, but they're still bleeding. The surgeons say there's more cases of rotting foot than bullet wounds these days. Cooper lost 2 toes to it last week and we were just on picket duty. A surgeon called it something like gangrene. My shoulders are raw from the weight of the equipment. 40 pounds of gear, musket, cartridge box, haversack, canteen, blanket roll. The weight never lessens, but you stop noticing it after a while, like everything else here. We passed through the remains of a skirmish. 3 hours of fighting left 38 dead. We found Private Miller, what was left of him, propped against an oak tree. Sharpshooter got him, entry wound clean through his eye. The exit took most of his skull. His mouth was still moving when we found him, tongue working soundlessly against his teeth. The surgeon said his brain just hadn't realized he was dead yet. We buried him with his letters from home still in his pocket. Nobody reads another man's letters here. Some things should remain sacred. June 26, 1863. Watched a man die of gangrene today. It started in his arm where the mini-ball hit him. By morning, the black spread past his shoulder. Surgeon took the arm, but too late. The poison was in his blood. His skin turned green-black, like meat left too long in the sun. The smell's sweet and rotten at the same time, and the smell means death. We all know it. I found half a potato in my haversack, saved it 3 days, split it 8 ways among the section. It's funny how something so small can mean so much now. Back home, we fed better scraps to the pigs. There's a dried flower pressed between these pages, badly deteriorated. June 27th, 1863. Buried Evans at dawn. He was fine yesterday morning, dead by midnight. That's the 6th man this month from disease alone. The surgeons tell us to boil our water. We don't really know why, but there's never time. You drink from puddles, streams, hoof prints, anywhere you could find it. Some men drank from a pond with a bloated horse in it. 3 of those men got deathly sick later in the day. Lieutenant Harrison went mad today as well. He started screaming about seeing his dead brother on the march. His brother died at Antietam. Took 3 days to die from a gut wound. Harrison kept saying he could smell his brother's inside rotting. Took 4 men to hold him down. They sent him to the rear with the other broken ones. The new replacement, Davies, showed me his sweetheart's daguerreotype today. Pretty girl, must have cost her family a small fortune to create it. Told him to burn it, though. You can't risk the rebels getting them if you're killed. Nothing worse than some Confederate soldier pawing at your wife's picture with bloody hands. June 28th, 1863. We found maggots in the salt pork this morning. The sergeant says to eat it anyway. Protein is protein. He's not wrong. We haven't had a proper meal since crossing into Pennsylvania. Some men tried eating the leather from their cartridge boxes after boiling it. It doesn't do much except for give you something to chew on. The new recruits still talk about glory. Veterans know better. Glory is watching your friend die in a field hospital that used to be a barn, with shit still on the ground, flies infesting wounds with maggots. Glory is burning lice out of your uniform seams with a candle. Glory is finding a dead man's boots that might fit you, because yours are nothing but bloody rags now. Jenkins brought out his harmonica tonight, played the battle cry of freedom that everybody loves, and for a moment, watching the boys sing along, you could almost forget where we were. Then the medicinal wagons started rolling in from the south, and the screaming drowned out the music. Found lice again, 3rd time this week. Morton showed me the trick, to run the candle flame along the seams. You can hear the eggs pop like tiny firecrackers. The smell makes you gag, but it's better than letting them eat you alive. Some men's backs are more scab than skin now from the itching. June 29th, 1863. Finally got paid today. 3 months' worth. $13 per month. The sutlers saw us coming, though, charging $5 for a can of peaches, $3 for a pound of coffee. It's highway robbery, but we pay it. You either pay their prices, or you keep eating wormy hardtack until your teeth loose from scurvy. Mills shot himself in the foot in the afternoon. Clean through, missed the bones. Lucky bastard will be sent home. Nobody reported him. We've all thought about it some days. When the dysentery hits and you're marching with a fever, a bullet through the foot starts to sound reasonable. The locals watch us pass through their towns. Women hold handkerchiefs to their faces. We smell that bad. Haven't bathed in weeks. The creek water's not safe to drink, let alone to wash in. Several pages of detailed supply lists and calculations for money owed to other soldiers follow. We found a rebel boy today. He couldn't have been more than 15. Got shot crying for his mama. I gave him water from my canteen. Sergeant saw me, spat on the ground, and walked away. The boy died holding my hand. His accent reminded me of Mary's friend from school who visited one summer. War makes you forget they're just boys too, until they're dying. I killed a man at close range. Bayonet work in the cornfield. You could read about it in books, but they never tell you how it feels when the blade goes in, how the man's eyes go wide with surprise more than pain, how warm the blood is when it runs down your rifle into your hands, and how they try to hold their insides in while they fall. I could still feel his weight on my bayonet, still see his face. Young man, red hair, freckles. Could have been anyone's son. Could have been my neighbor back home. I wrote a letter to Mary tonight. Couldn't tell her what I'd done. How do you tell your sister you're a killer? Something's been following us for 3 days now, always at the edge of the firelight. The sentries say it's just a wolf, but wolves don't walk on 2 legs, and wolves don't drag their dead behind them. Sergeant Miller says it's battle fatigue making us see things, but he sleeps with his bayonet fixed now. June 30th, 1863. 2 men went missing in the early hours, Private Reynolds and Corporal Hayes. We found Reynolds' finger bones arranged in a perfect circle near the latrine holes, stripped clean like a bird had picked them. Rings still on one. Hayes just vanished. His watch was left hanging from a tree branch, still ticking. The old-timers say they've seen something like this before, at Shiloh. Said after the first day's slaughter, something started following the armies. Something that wore dead men's faces and mimicked their voices. Called out to soldiers using the voices of their dead friends, luring them into the woods at night. The chaplain finally spoke about it today. Says it's not one thing out there. Says the war itself has wakened something. All this blood, all this death, it is bound to awaken something. And it reminds me of the time we lost 4 men during our time at Hunting Creek. We did not lose them to rebels, but to whatever was stalking our camp. Found their boots in a neat row by the creek, like they just stepped out of them and walked into the mist. No bodies, no blood, just boot prints leading into the water, and then nothing else. The scouts found strange tracks in the mud. The prints were shaped like a man's boot, but splayed and twisted, as if every bone in the foot had been broken and reset. Each step sank 6 inches deep, like whatever made them carried an impossible weight. The chaplain made the sign of the cross and walked away. June 30th, 1863. Nighttime. The thing in the woods is getting bolder. 3 men swear they saw it during evening mass. Said it looked like a soldier at first, Confederate gray in the twilight, but when it turned, Davis said its face was like a corpse left too long in the sun. The oddest thing is that the rats run from it. Even the camp dogs won't bark. They just whimper and hide. Nature knows what doesn't belong. We found Jameson trying to eat shoe leather. His mind's going like Webster's did before Chancellorsville. You see it happens sometimes. Men just break, not from the fighting, but from the endless marching, the constant hunger, the bone-deep exhaustion that never leaves you. The boys learn quick about the rats. They're bold now, fat from feeding on the dead. You learn to sleep with your brogans tied to your pack, or you wake up with the leather chewed away. Some men eat them if they could catch them. Meat's meat, they say. I'm not that hungry, at least not yet. Richardson caught a bullet in the gut. Took him 6 hours to die. We all pretended not to hear him begging for his mother. Better than the ones who catch it in the face, though. At least he could still talk. When Jimmy Collins got hit, all he could do was make this sound like a pig being slaughtered. And sometimes I still hear it in my sleep. The hunger does something to your mind after a while. Makes everything sharp and dull at the same time. You start seeing things that aren't there. You start smelling fresh bread in the gun smoke. Start hearing your mother's voice in the wind. But you keep marching because the alternative is desertion, and we all know what happens to deserters. But anyway, they say there's a big battle coming. Gettysburg. We're nearly there. Maybe it'll be the one that ends this war. More likely, it'll just be another field to fill with bodies. Another place for the rats to grow fat. July 4th, 1863, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. My hands still shake as I write these words. The past 3 days have been nothing short of hell itself, and I fear these memories will haunt me until my dying day. It began on the morning of July 1st. We'd been marching hard through Pennsylvania, tracking Lee's army, when the sound of gunfire erupted ahead near a small crossroads town called Gettysburg. Our company rushed forward to support the cavalry, who'd engaged the rebels west of town. The fighting was fierce. I'd never seen such determination in the enemy's eyes before. By afternoon, the casualties were mounting by the hundreds, our boys falling like wheat before a scythe. We were then pushed back through the town itself, past houses where terrified civilians peered out from behind shuttered windows. The retreat was chaos, men stumbling over their own dead, the air thick with smoke and the screams of the wounded. Thank Providence, we managed to establish a strong position on Cemetery Hill. The second was worse still. The fighting at Devil's Den and Little Round Top. The slaughter. Nearly 20,000 wounded men filled every building in town. I helped carry some of the makeshift hospitals. The surgeons worked without rest, their bloody aprons a testament to their grim work. The screams from the amputation tables. I shall never forget them. The third surpassed all understanding. Around 1 o'clock, the rebels opened up with every gun they had. For nearly 2 hours, the world was nothing but thunder and flying iron. We huddled behind our stone wall, praying to survive the barrage. Then we saw them coming. Thousands of rebels emerging from the woods across the field, their battle flags flying. Pickett's men, we learned later, nearly 12,000 strong. Our guns opened up, tearing great holes in their lines, yet still they came. The courage of those men, even though they be our enemies, cannot be questioned. When they reached our lines, it was bayonet to bayonet, musket to musket. The fighting was so desperate that men forgot to load and instead used their rifles as clubs. The field surgeons work without stopping now. They don't even wipe their saws between amputations anymore. They just keep cutting. The pile of limbs behind the medical tent grows by the hour, and sometimes they twitch like they're trying to crawl back to their owners. Found Williams crawling through the wheat field, both legs gone below the knee. He was trying to push himself forward with his elbows, leaving a trail like a slug. Said he was looking for his feet. Wanted to die with them on. The morphine finally took him around sunset. The flies are everywhere. They lay their eggs in the wounds of men still breathing. By morning, the maggots are already at work. The surgeons say they keep the wounds clean, eat the rotting flesh. Small mercies. Our guns opened up, tearing great lines. Tonight I write by candlelight. The fields around me are littered with over 50,000 dead, wounded, and missing Americans. The moans of the dying drift across the battlefield like some terrible chorus. The surgeons still work, their piles of severed limbs growing even higher. The July heat has turned the air rancid with death. We've won a great victory, they say, but as I look out over the blood-soaked fields of Pennsylvania, I wonder, can any man truly call this winning? Tomorrow we will begin burying our dead. May God have mercy on all our souls. Gettysburg. Damn that fucking hellfire of a pit. We all lost good friends and good family. July 5th, 1863. The fields are carpeted with bodies. Blue and gray uniforms blend together in death covered in crimson, making it impossible to tell friend from foe. The buzzards don't care which side they feast on. Yesterday I saw a man walk 10 paces with his intestines dragging behind him like a grotesque parade streamer. He was trying to stuff them back in, looking confused, as if he couldn't understand why his insides were outside. I also thought I caught a glimpse of the thing that had been following us, wearing other people's faces like a deranged mask. But maybe it was all in my head. The worst thing was watching Richardson die. We'd shared the same tent for months. He told me about his wife back home, expecting their first child. The artillery shell landed right next to him on July 2nd. The sound of his skin ripping like wet leather being torn, I'll never forget. Half his rib cage was gone, and I could see his heart still beating in the cavity. He looked at me, trying to speak, but only blood came out. His eyes, they knew. They knew he would never see his child. Mary, I'm not sure if I believe in God anymore. No benevolent creator could allow this hell on earth. If you find this, I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise to come home. The man who left Burlington died somewhere between Chancellorsville and Gettysburg. What's left of me isn't fit for peacetime anymore. Father was right about slavery being evil, but he was wrong about war being the answer. War just replaces one evil with another. It takes good men and hollows them out, fills the space with darkness. It awakens something dark and awful. I don't dream anymore. Not really. I just relive the same moments over and over. The sounds, the smells, the faces of men I couldn't save. The faces of men I had to kill, and it isn't over yet. It looks like we'll have to chase Lee all the way back to Maryland. Remember me as I was, and not as I am. Your brother, Thomas. 13th Vermont Infantry. I closed the journal, my hand shaking. Outside, children play in the summer sun, oblivious to the horrors that these pages contain. I think about my grandmother, keeping this brutal piece of history hidden away all these years. Perhaps some memories are better left in attics, gathering dust alongside the ghosts of the past. But we owe it to them, to Thomas Wheeler and all the others, to remember. Not the sanitized version, but the truth. The horrible, brutal, necessary truth. Because those who forget the true face of war are doomed to paint it with glory and send new generations to discover its horrors anew.